Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. T Gill here with another episode of Historian Reacts. Sorry I haven't been uploading the last couple weeks. Been kind of busy with work and other things going on in my life. In today's video, we're going to be watching Rise of the Nations. It's from a series called Between Two Wars by Time Ghost History. It was recommended by a viewer of the channel. I probably won't watch all of them just because there is 58 videos in the series. I'll watch a couple of them at least and react to them, and then I might watch the rest on my own. We'll kind of see how it goes. Without further ado, let's just get into the video. Let's go.
At the end of 1918, the Great War is over, but in Europe, on the now silent battlefields, there are new nations and new leaders springing up, and those battlefields will soon see a lot of renewed warfare as those nations fight each other or fight themselves.
I like this guy's set first. I love the art behind him. This column, I can't tell if it goes all the way up or if it's just a little set piece. His decanter over here. Books. Oh, he's got his glass of whiskey. Historians love whiskey. Oh, he's got a couple bottles here. His lights. It's a really cool set.
Civil War.
Definitely better than mine, where it's just my bookshelf. You can see part of a couch on this side. Actually, you might be able to see part of the couch on that side too. Oh well. Ooh, that's loud. Okay, that has a nice
Welcome
intro.
To Between Two Wars, a chronological summary of the Interwarriors covering the life, uncertainty.
Okay, so I guess I didn't even put two and two together. So this is kind of the world between World War I, World War II. Got it.
Hedonism and euphoria of the 1920s, the descent of that life into the poverty, suspicion, fear, and autocracy of the 1930s, and ultimately humanity's descent into the darkness of the Second World War.
It's crazy how fast things can change, you know, go from World War I, a horrible war, you know, a war that no one had ever seen before, into the Roaring '20s, where a lot of countries are prospering, especially the United States and some other European countries. And then into the '30s, where everything's uncertain. Countries don't know what's going to happen. People don't know what's going to happen. And then, like you said, into the 1940s, where we are honestly in our darkest time. It's kind of crazy to think about.
I'm Indy Nidell.
What up, Indy?
As soon as the Great War is over, a huge change comes over Europe. In the vacuum created when the Central Powers collapsed and the Russian Civil War rages on in the East, new nations arise. Poland becomes independent again after 123
Poor Poland.
years of partition. Czechoslovakia becomes a republic. A Hungarian Democratic Republic is declared. Latvia declares independence from Russia. The British military government of Palestine begins. Montenegro becomes part of Serbia. Iceland regains independence from Denmark. Transylvania again becomes part of Romania. The Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes is established. Now,
It is kind of crazy to think that a lot of this land was just under the control of a couple different countries. Obviously, once the Russian Civil War ends and the USSR happens, things change again. And even when the Third Reich happens, things change even more.
Important to note that although these lands have in some way maybe existed before in history, they have never been nation states, nor have they ever been truly independent. Most certainly they haven't been constitutional democracies, not ever. They arise out of the ruins of an old system of feudal allegiances, where the land might have had the name they adopt when they become countries, but rather than countries, they had been the land dependencies of a complex system of more or less interrelated dukes, princes, kings, queens.
It's crazy to think that a lot of the most powerful people in the world were all related somehow, even if it was just by marriage. It's not as bad now. Obviously, their descendants are still going to be distantly related. But yeah, it's like this whole web, all of Europe, most of Europe, at some point was related to each other.
Emperors and empresses. in the past 200 years. Some of them have achieved some representation of the people, but were never self-governing. Some of them, like Poland, might have been independent kingdoms for a while at some point.
Yep.
But even then, they were the lands of some family, not the lands of the people. There has been much research on the concept of national identity, right? The majority of historians today agree that before the 18th century, there was no such thing. Some studies even indicate
the 18th century, yeah, I would agree with that. And the 19th century is really when it comes into play. Like in the last video that we did with the unification of Germany, that was one of the biggest things. Was national identity was one of the biggest factors of them coming together.
That a widespread sense of nationality doesn't arise until shortly before the beginning of the 20th century, or even only with the World War. During the 19th century, there was, though, a concerted effort by politicians and intellectuals to promote national identity, especially as identity politics almost always connects with interest politics. This all contributed to the complex web of conflicts that led to the Great War. Now,
I guess I never realized the amount of artwork that has countries' flags in them. It's kind of cool. I love that. That's really cool. The colors, the red and the pink, contrasting with one off of one another. Oh,
after that war,
beautiful.
Or perhaps because of it, that has pretty much succeeded, and nationalism is the standard way of looking at the world. But there's a problem. Although the nationalist movement has already created a definition, or actually many conflicting mythical definitions of what these new nations are and where they came from, reality is much more complex. In Central and Eastern Europe, where many new nations now arise, there has been a balance held in place since 1648 and the Peace of Westphalia that settled the previous identity conflict between Protestants and Catholics within the Habsburg Empire. The idea is that national identity is based on some mix of ethnicity, geography, religion, whatever else. Unfortunately for the now fervent nationalists, there are no natural borders on which to base these new divisions. If the lines have ever existed at all, they've never been clear. So no matter which way you cut it, a lot of people with any given language and common cultural identity will end up on the wrong side of some border. And you move that border a little to fix that, and it's another language group that gets split instead.
Happens a lot. Well, I guess the biggest one here in the United States would have been the Native Americans, how they had their own, sovereign areas or sovereign nations. You know, got the Cherokee Nation, and I think there's a couple other ones. Can't think of them off the top of my head. That eventually they all get pushed away and pushed back and back and back, and now Oklahoma is the area with the most Native American reservations.
Now, this might sound trivial to those who are not affected, but it's certainly not to those who feel strongly about national identity. And in 1918, some people are starting to feel very, very strongly about national identity. So this is not some academic analysis or political opinion from our time. It's a real, tangible issue that will have catastrophic effects.
Yes, it will.
You see, people will start wars over
millions
this,
of people,
steal each other's property, rob them of their rights, incarcerate, torture, and mass murder each other over identity, starting now in the autumn of 1918 as the new borders are drawn. And Germany, that last man standing that finally stopped fighting the war on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, well, a week before that happens, sailors of the Imperial High Seas Fleet mutinied in Kiel. The mutineers were imprisoned, but thousands of civilians marched in the streets demanding their release. Shots were exchanged, and over 30 men were killed or injured. This is usually seen as the beginning of the German Revolution, which soon broke out in cities like Wilhelmshaven, Hanover, Braunschweig, and Munich. Actually, in Munich, a workers' council forces the last king of Bavaria, Ludwig III, to abdicate, and a Bavarian free state is declared. In Berlin, Kaiser Wilhelm II is also forced to abdicate, and a revolutionary council of people's deputies is proclaimed, led by the Social Democrats and Friedrich Ebert. While revolutionary forces continue to fight for regional Soviet-style republics, the moderate parties under Ebert are fighting for a democratic federal union. For all practical purposes, Germany is now at civil war. Another nation at civil war is Russia. After the November Revolution,
it's crazy how fast things change. Like I said earlier, with the Roaring '20s into the Depressions, into World War II, but right after one of the biggest wars the world had ever seen comes Civil War, and then almost directly after comes Second World War.
Revolution of 1917, the Bolshevik leadership under Lenin had withdrawn from the World War. The Brest-Litovsk Treaty gave Germany huge swaths of land all over Eastern Europe, which had, with Germany's defeat, become many of the new Eastern European nations. Some regions also seceded from Russia during the Civil War, while counter-revolutionaries tried to turn the tide. The by now fairly well-organized Bolshevik forces, the Reds, face a mess of different counter-revolutionary factions, the Whites. Now these imperialists, Democrats, proto-fascists, monarchists, and God knows what else, are fighting bitterly not only against the Reds, but also for control of the war between each other. While Germany and Russia continue to burn and nations form all over Europe, there's also unrest in many.
A lot of people don't realize too is the Japanese-Russian War was also a big turning point in the in Russia to start that civil war, to start the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. If Russia had not lost that war, it might never have happened.
Many other parts of the world.
But again,
China,
history is
the new
what it
republic
is.
that had deposed the emperor in 1912 is already falling apart. Although the Republic of China still exists officially, in reality, the country is now under control of local warlords. Other parts of China are under Japanese control. Japan had fought on the side of the Allies in World War I and expanded its influence on the Asian mainland and in the Pacific. Together with the U.S.,
Another example of how an ally becomes an enemy, and we kind of let them have what they wanted at first, because it was in the best interest of the Allies. But then 30 years later, bites us in the ass.
they're now involved in eastern Siberia in an attempt to stop the Bolsheviks from establishing control of the Russian Pacific Rim. On the Japanese home islands, a fragile democracy had been established in 1912, but the Taisho democracy is now under threat from a popular rise of fascism striving for expansion and militarization. In India, Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, France and Britain have tightened their control over their colonial dependencies. Nevertheless, there is increasing unrest as the peoples of these regions watch new independent nations arise all over the rest of the world. In the Middle East, the British have made the Emir Faisal king of Greater Syria.
It's crazy that colonies were still a thing even up until after World War II. And if you really want to think about it, the Commonwealth that Great Britain has with Canada and Australia, I wouldn't really call them colonies. They are their own independent nations. They still fall under control of Britain in a way. But yeah, it's
Syria, a British dependency. They've also promised him a new pan-Arabic nation. This is a reward for uniting the Arab tribes, together with Lawrence of Arabia, on the side of the Allies against the Ottoman Empire and the other Central Powers. But the intricate web of financial interest, oil fields, and agreements like Sykes-Picot that divides up the region between France and Britain, or the Balfour Declaration that promises a Jewish state in Palestine, now stand in the way of a united Arabia. So, as 1918 ends, the armistice of World War I is not yet a peace treaty, nor is there any peace, and it will stay like this for some time. The wars will rage on, and a peace treaty that will be forged in Paris at the peace conference that is about to begin will be fraught with weakness.
Yep.
Instead of solving the budding ethnic conflicts, it will fan them. But before we get to all of that, in our next episode, we'll take a look at the Spanish flu, which had as much of an impact on 1919 as the war did. To get our episodes ahead of time and support us to make more
Hey, I'm gonna go back to full screen here. I like that video. That was a very good video, very informative, especially for being 9 minutes long. There's a lot of information in there. A lot of information that I knew but forgotten about, and I learned some new information too. This guy's very informative. I think it's a good video. I really do. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is gonna be a shorter one, looks like, but hey, things happen. I'm hoping to get back on track with a more regular upload schedule, maybe 1 or 2 videos a week with this series, and I still need to get back into my gaming, get those channels, or not those channels, but those series back up and running. Dog and cat running out of here. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe for more content. If you like this video, please share it. And until next time, peace.